Welcome back to Industry Conversation. Like I mentioned earlier, my guest today is one who has recorded landmark achievements in the Nigerian media industry. He is the former commercial director of TVC Communications, Mr. Ronan Redmond. Glad to have you join us on the program, sir.
It's great to be here. Thank you very much.
All right, so tell us, how has it been 7 years down the line? How does it feel to, to have recorded such impressive records with TVC?
Well, to be honest with you, how it feels is I'm in a bit of shock when you say 7 years because it has flown by. I came out originally on a contract for 3 weeks.
Wow.
3 weeks. And my contract kept getting renewed. And I find myself here saying goodbye to you after 7 years. It's flown by. It's been a fantastic time, and we've much to talk about, I'm sure, this morning.
All right, great. So tell us, in the span of 7 years, what would you describe as some of the landmark achievements that you have made?
Well, I think whatever about myself, I think the company as a whole. When I consider where the company was when we arrived, we set ourselves 3 areas that we would really focus on. First and foremost, our staff, because they are the assets of the company. We have a large workforce, 500 people. They had a lot of concerns. They needed to be addressed. Second is our audience, whether it's our TV audience or our radio audience, they are our customers. So they needed to be given much better content that they could engage with. And thirdly, the people who pay our bills, the advertisers, they come to us once we've got an audience that their clients want to advertise to. So I think over the 7 years, with all of the initiatives and business initiatives, staffing initiatives that were put in place by the team as a whole, and I play a small part of that, I think we've got to a point 7 years later where we've a workforce who are very committed. All of their concerns, are addressed in terms of getting to work, transport, childcare, healthcare, pensions, etc. All of those were big concerns 7 years ago. They've been addressed. We've grown the audience from 5 million to 25 million plus, and we have taken the revenue, the advertising revenue, and we've increased it by 500% in the 7 years. So all in all, in there somewhere, a lot of achievements that the company has achieved them in the last 7 years. And some small part, I'll take a bit of the glow for that, of course.
Awesome. So tell us, are there things you had hoped to change, but you haven't been able to in the amount of time you've spent?
No, I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. Because the way I personally operate is I foresee what the problems are, and I'm prepared with my team to address those problems head on. So we get involved. We get down into the detail of the nitty-gritty. When we see a problem, we analyze it, we break it down, and then we find ways either around it or through it. So I'm left with no regrets. I didn't sit on the sideline and say that's too big an issue we can't address. Rather, I felt if there was an issue in our way, but it was important that we addressed it for business success, well then with my team, we tended to get into the trenches and do what was required to remove those obstacles, and hence the business success that we're looking back on today.
Wow, that's quite impressive. Okay, so let's talk about the Nigerian media industry. Now, having spent the amount of time you spent during your work period in Nigeria, how would you assess the Nigerian media industry?
Well, I think it's a very vibrant industry. I think there's a lot of great stakeholders within the business. Okay. Like any media industry, no matter where you are globally, it faces challenges. It faces post-COVID, the whole media business is facing huge disruption. Digital transformation is something that we all have to be aware of. In our lives, the consumer is the center part of our lives, and the way the consumer is consuming media now is very, very different to even 7 years ago when I came. So it has challenges, but we can learn from how our partners globally are facing those challenges.
you are renowned for the significant contributions you have made in the Nigerian media and, advertising industry as a whole. How does it feel knowing that your name has been etched in the history of, the success that has now been recorded in that landscape?
Well, it's very nice of you to say that, but I don't see it like that at all. I mean, my role extended well beyond TBC. I'm a great believer in a rising tide lifts all boats. So unfortunately, when I arrived, the media landscape was in recession and it was decreasing each year. No matter what I did in TVC, we could only do so much for TVC. I needed the sector as a whole to arrest its decline. And I saw it as a prudent move on my part to engage the stakeholders in the industry and try and help and accommodate the stakeholders in finding a way that together we could increase the size of the advertising market. And one of those areas is, in actual fact, what we're doing today. We work in a communications business. Too often we don't communicate. I felt I had the ability to offer through our TV channels and our radio channels at TVC, I was able to give oxygen to some of the stakeholders in the industry so that they could tell the story of what advertising can do on behalf of their clients, whether they appeared in our business program. But the biggest success in all of that has been the show that we're on now, Marketing Edge on TV. That was a driver, and I was passionate about working with John and the team to get this show on air, because our industry needs a voice, and Marketing Edge is that voice. We need to communicate the power of advertising, the power of media to the people who pay our wages and pay our bills. And that's where we got to. So all I did was I was just a facilitator, but it's very nice of you to say that you think that's had an impact.
Great. So what do you think the impact of the solutions that you have created, on behalf of brand managers or brand owners, what do you think is the impact it would have on business? Yeah,
there's two areas where I really strongly advocated over the last number of years, especially starting with COVID. CMOs, chief marketing officers, have to get braver and have to get bolder. The problem we saw during COVID and post-COVID in the tough macroeconomic times that we're in, the first thing business owners will do is they look to cut marketing budgets. That impacts on us all. So we need very strong CMOs to be able to sit at the table with the other executives and to fight for that marketing budget and to fight to stop. It's those companies who continue to advertise during a recession. They're the companies who will come out stronger than those who take the easy option, which is to cut the ad spend. The second thing that I would have brought to this marketplace from my experience is no longer do brand advertisers want spot advertising. They want far more innovative media solutions. And that's what I tried to do, whether it was through product placement, whether it was through branded content, whether it was through guest appearance. So we tried to offer a much more rounded communication solutions than what TVC had done in the past, which was just, here's a rate card, buy a spot. So we extended it out.
Great. So what would you suggest or advise media owners and professionals to do in order to boost media growth in Nigeria?
Well, the first thing they have to do is communicate. I mean, we have to make a strong case as to why advertising and marketing expenditure has to keep as it was, if not grow. We have to present value. We have to show value. And most importantly, we have to show return on investment. We have to show that the money spent on advertising has an impact on sales. That if you advertise and spend money on marketing, you will sell your products more than you would have if you hadn't spent. So hence your return of investment warrants that expenditure. As I say, we're in a communications business. Oftentimes, we are the poorest communicators. We're too busy doing the day-to-day. We don't stand back and tell the story that we need to be telling about the strength and the power of media and advertising.
Great. So, talking about advertising and the advertising spend, now what's your projection? What's your take on the advertising ad spend projection for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I think we have to be, we have to be really, really careful in how we answer a question like that, because the first issue we're faced with is there's not enough robust market data to tell us what's actually happening in the market in terms of spend. So an awful lot of it is anecdotal evidence. And the problem we're faced now, when the macroeconomic challenges are so challenging, everybody's just putting their hands up and saying nobody's spending. The reality is people are spending. They're just choosing to consolidate their spend. So if you look at DSTV at the moment and you look at Nigerian Idols, you see Techno and Biggie are big sponsors there. I'm sure all the big sponsors will reappear again when it comes to Big Brother. If I watch EPL, I see MTN, I see Guinness, I see Indomie. There is sizable spend in the market. I see when I drive around on the Third Mainland Bridge and beyond, I see more and more poster sites going up. There is money being spent, it's being consolidated. The problem we have, the fundamental problem we have in Nigeria is there are too many media licenses. Too many people have media licenses, and far too often a lot of those people with licenses are not media people. They can't run a proper media business. They don't make money, but what they do is they make a lot of noise about there's no money in the market. That's not the reality. There is money in the market. And there will be, to answer your question, the second half of the year, we just have to pull up our socks and we have to work harder to prove that our media company deserves a share of that budget.
Wow. So that was aptly said. So you mentioned a lot of we had too many media houses or licenses. Now, what would you say, or how would you say Nigeria has fared in terms of regulations and the media landscape?
Well, I think, look, regulation is incredibly important. Regulation is even more important now as digital becomes such a player in the space. But I differentiate in my job, which is commercial, I differentiate between editorial regulation and commercial regulation. I'm all for editorial regulation when it comes to the likes of online and what people can say and get away with, etc., and the whole area of fake news. My real concern when it comes to regulation in this market is, am I sure that the regulators are keeping abreast of the developments in the commercial media landscape? So many media companies now rely on advertising to simply keep their businesses going. It's not good enough to regulate me the way you regulated me 7 to 10 years ago. If I can't offer some of the initiatives we spoke about earlier, whether it's sponsorship, product placement, guest appearances, etc., if I can't offer that, well, then those advertisers will move to DSTV because they're not in the same regulation space as I am when it comes to what's appearing on air. So the regulator, and I'm not sure that they need to keep a pace with what's happening commercially. And I see it in particular in the whole streaming space. The big development in America, and we're going to see it here pretty quickly, is the realization that the streaming model, the subscription, where you pay a subscription, that model doesn't work commercially because people can't afford to have 4 or 5 different stream. I can't afford to have Paramount, Disney, Netflix, etc. I will pick and choose. So what those companies are doing is say, okay, we've got to give a cheaper model, and the way we'll fund that is through advertising. So streaming funded by advertising is going to become the next big, I believe, media ecosystem. And how is the regulator going to even address that? So my fear is they're not keeping abreast with what's the huge changes that are happening, and that they're going back to former templates. And that doesn't serve those of us who are trying to make an honest living in the media space. That doesn't serve us well. I'm all for regulation. I'm all for editorial regulation, as I said, in the online space, etc. And we're seeing huge work in Europe on that. But I have real concerns, and I plead with the regulator to work with the industry stakeholders to keep abreast of the commercial developments.
When Ronan Redmond is mentioned in the Nigeria media industry, what would you want it to be about? What would you want your name to be remembered for in the industry?
I don't need my name to be remembered at all. However, very quickly, I think why I stayed as long as I did is because personally I love interaction, and I realized very quickly that I believe the Irish and the Nigerian personalities are very similar. We enjoy face-to-face business communication. That's what I enjoy. All of my work was spent outside the office, meeting key clients or looking for new clients and advertisers, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. I would hope that those people I met in that time would remember me as somebody who was possibly empathetic. I understood the tough environment we were all operating in, and no matter what market I operate in, my premise is always to try and deal with you on a win-win basis. Yes, I will always need something out of our negotiation, but I fully understand that you too need to walk away from that with something as well. And I would hope that that's how people might remember me, because I don't believe prior to my arrival that's how people saw TVC, but hopefully that legacy will continue.
Great. So what would be your advice for the new commercial director at TVC? I know you are the former commercial director. What would be your advice for the new?
Yeah, it's I've always said it over the 7 years. We work in an incredibly simple business. The metrics are really simple. The consumer's at the center of everything we do, so we've got to look after our audiences. If we look after our audiences, the advertisers will come. But within all that, what I would say to the management, and this is where I got most enjoyment, is in the media industry, whether it's TVC, whether it's any other media company, it's your people are your assets, and it is a young person's business, and young people need to be given their voice. They need to be allowed to make mistakes, and they need to be able to learn from those mistakes. And thereafter, it becomes a very rewarding business, I believe, for anyone to work in.
Great. So what would be your pattern shirts for TVC or to TVC and the Nigeria media industry generally?
Look, I'm just filled with huge admiration for the practitioners in the media business. It's been a tough number of years all around the world, certainly. So it has been tough around the world, but it's been incredibly tough in this market. We've seen lots of different developments which have impacted on the consumer, which have impacted on the media companies, and yet through all of that, the resilience, the innovation, and just the sheer will to do the job that I've seen here really, really leaves me with very, very fond memories. But that's one thing. I fully believe that Nigeria continues to have incredible potential in the media, in the wider media and entertainment space, whether it's Nollywood, whether it's advertising, whether it's media, whether it's all of that ecosystem. And the reason it has is because of the size and the scale of the young population. And remember, it's always that young consumer population who are now consuming their media across many different devices. That is the population, or that's the consumer that those brands are trying to get to. So it's a very exciting market when the economic conditions come around, which I've no doubt they will. Nigeria stands in a really good position, and I'm very, very excited by the journey Nigeria has in front of it, certainly in the media and entertainment space.
Okay, so would you, if given a new opportunity, would you be willing to come back to Nigeria, into the media and advertising space?
Not come back in, but Nigeria will form. I will stay on the continent of Africa. I will work with companies who need to upscale in markets across Africa. Nigeria is possibly the biggest market. So regardless whether I want to or not, Nigeria is going to be on my radar, simply because the people who I will work with going forward will see it as a market that they need to be involved with. And for that reason, you ain't getting rid of me so quickly.
That sounds very interesting. Okay, so you have given a lot to the Nigerian media landscape. What would you say are some of the takeaways for you?
I think we have possibly covered them insofar as I don't believe I've given a lot, other than sometimes when you come from the outside, all it affords you to do is be a little bit dispassionate when you're looking at something. You see it a little bit differently because you haven't been involved in the day-to-day. The one thing I would say is I still believe there's a job to be done for the different stakeholders in the industry to come together, because I believe there's strength in numbers. At the moment, and it's understandable, when the macroeconomic conditions are so tough, we all just put our head down and we focus on our own area of expertise. I mentioned to you earlier, if Nollywood, if the media agencies, if the advertisers, if that whole ecosystem was able to come together and demonstrate the revenue they generate every year, the contribution they make to GDP, well then I believe the media and entertainment space, which is what we've just been talking about, could make a case to the federal government as to how that can be as important as agri, as fintech, when the government is looking for alternative sectors to the dependence that they've had on oil and gas. But we have to come together as a group. Too often I read in Business Day or other publications, Nollywood is worth this, media is worth that. We need to find one number that covers all of that, that demonstrates the strength it has, and then the stakeholders take interest, and then we can say to the stakeholders, you need to invest back in this sector, you need to give us tax breaks, you need to give us lighter regulation, you need to make the environment such that we can operate to the best of our abilities, and we will contribute to GDP, and that's what I believe.
Wow, that's quite up. Now, taking a bow, and you mentioned earlier that your contract was supposed to be for 3 weeks.
It was.
But it is spent over 7 years. Now, how would you describe Nigerians and their, social relations to foreigners, in your experience?
In my experience, well, the first thing I did when I came here was I learned from one of the ministers that I met, that very quickly I need to tell people I'm Irish, I'm not English. He said, look, you go a long way if you tell people you're Irish and not English. So I learned that very quickly. So for 7 years I've been saying I'm Irish. On a more serious note, I'm all about local. I'm all about the mix of global and local. And I have worked in other European markets, and what I'd learned from those and what I try to bring here is you can never, as a non-national, come somewhere and try and impose your way of thinking. All I have done in Nigeria is used my years of experience in other markets and married them to the very best of what's here in Nigeria. I believe we've a bit of a way to go in Nigeria when it comes to how we deal. We should be open to multinationals. We should be open. We should be making life easier for multinationals in Europe, in Ireland and in England, where I come from, but England, which is a neighbour. The health service doesn't function because we're not letting in enough overseas workers. The hospitality industry in Ireland and the UK depends on overseas workers. We're not letting them in. Those industries are all suffering. likewise, the same will happen here. We are very strong in Nigeria. We should be able to hold our head up and say within our own right, we're strong enough to stand on our own 2 feet. We don't need to be pushing others out. In actual fact, we can take the best of others, and allied to us, we can be something much bigger and better than we are.
Great. Okay, so tell us, what are some of the fond memories you have of Nigeria?
The people. It's the people. It is the people. The people are what will leave the lasting impression with me. They will be the memories, the fun we've had. They will be the memories. It's the people all the way.
Okay, so just before I let you go, what is next for Ronan Redmond?
Ronan Redmond is going to go back to South Africa, where I live in Cape Town. I'm going to reintroduce myself to my wife and my 2 children, and I'm going to hope that they accept me back in the fold, and then I'll take it from there. I'm sure they'll have plenty of jobs. On a work front, I will continue to work with companies in the media and entertainment space across sub-Saharan Africa, so we will cross paths again.
Wow, it has been an absolute joy speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Great. And that's the much we can take on this week's episode of Marketing Edge on TV. Join us same time next week for another informative episode. I am Oluwabukola Omoni. Bye for now.